Hello! This video is going to be a bit different from my other videos because I won't be reviewing a book. I'm reviewing a video game. And to do so, I will need to spoil it, and a couple others. The list of games I'm going to spoil includes Home, the main subject of this video, Silent Hill 2, and Silent Hill Downpour. Whoa, what's this? 2 videos in 1 month? 3 if you're a patron, patreon.com/intergy. It's a Christmas in July miracle. Since it feels really weird to do a video on my booktube channel that isn't about books, I'm going to start off this video by recommending some books that I, for various reasons, can't or won't make a video about. The first is I Remember You by, oh goodness, Yrsa Sigurðardóttir. I tried. It is a wild ride, but in a good way, not in a talk about it on this channel sort of way. It follows 2 storylines. The first is about a married couple and their friend who go to a resort tourist destination town during the off-season, and it's completely empty because they bought a house that they want to renovate and turn into a bed and breakfast. Only the house they bought is wicked haunted. And in the other storyline, a small-town psychologist helps the police investigate a recent suicide, only to find out that the victim has a mysterious connection with his missing son. It's a really fun read, but it does have a somewhat frustrating habit of ending the chapter on a cliffhanger and swapping to the other plotline. The chapters are just long enough that you kind of forget your place in the other story too, so the one chapter will end with Ghost House in serious trouble, physical peril, and you'll be like, hey, wait, I was watching that. But then CSI Reykjavik will be like, did you know that the suicide victim was part of a group of friends who all died in freak accidents in the past 5 years? And you'll be like, I did not know that, tell me more right now. And it'll be like, no, time for more Ghost House. There are a few things that I don't want to get into in this video, but a few days after I finished reading the book, I went, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. But it's all just nitpicky bullshit, and it didn't detract from my enjoyment of the story any. The other book I want to mention is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. It's like a House of Leaves adjacent. So it's about this man who lives in this seemingly endless house full of giant statues and sometimes the ocean, and he slowly begins to uncover the mystery of who he was and how he came to live in the house. Like I said, it gives me the same feeling that House of Leaves did. Well, not all of the same feelings. No dogs die in Piranesi. Spoilers for the House of Leaves. Fuck it. House of Leaves 2. It was a really interesting story about a man who finds a book written about a documentary that doesn't seem to exist about an impossible house with a labyrinth inside. So the main text of the book is the book about the fictional documentary, but the protagonist has his own narrative going on in the footnotes about his thoughts on the book and what's going on in his life and his traumatic past. It does really interesting things with the way pages are composed. There will be square windows in the middle of a page that show the text from the next page, and a chapter later in the book that is a coded message from the protagonist's mother, and a part where this is technically a spoiler, but where the protagonist meets some people in a bar who are fans of House of Leaves and want to discuss it with the protagonist. It's that kind of book. There, have I done my due diligence in talking about books on my BookTube channel? Good. Let's move on to complaining about this video game that I hate. Home is a choose-your-own-adventure novel that is pretending to be a horror-adventure game. It stars a man who wakes up in a house that isn't his, and he walks out into the hallway to find a dead body. Did he kill this stranger, and if so, why? The protagonist has no idea. The last thing he remembers is going into his own house and seeing Rachel, who is his wife. The majority of the game is you guiding this dipshit around spooky locations like the murder house or the sewers underneath the murder house, and occasionally solving click on this thing a few times puzzles to pad out the runtime of the game. Because without having to click on puzzle elements 5 times each, the game would be 5 minutes long. So when I remembered that this game existed and decided to make a video about it, I decided to play through it again, because the last time I touched it was in 2016, and I wanted to make sure I had all my details right. And there were things that I had forgotten, like the fact that the house you wake up in is the most confusingly designed house that isn't a Spencer's mansion. On the 2nd floor there's the dining room, but the kitchen is downstairs. And there are so many clocks in this house, every room and hallway has at least 1 clock, and because of the pixel art style, the clocks have to be massive to convey what they are. So every room in this weird house has at least 1 torso-sized clock on the wall. and there's this button hidden behind a picture on the second floor that unlocks a door downstairs that leads to a ladder that goes into spooky underground tunnels. And once you get into the tunnels, you obviously click on everything you see to try and find the clues or, the story. And one of the things you click on is a bunch of papers on the wall, and the protagonist describes it as being a list of houses where murders have happened. And one of the houses mentioned is his house, and he goes, "Man, I should have stuck around and investigated more," and then the game wrests control from you and forces the player to move forward, even though I wasn't done clicking on things. I managed to get him to stop running forwards by clicking on a table and finding a gun. Exploring the underground, it's basically a serial killer's torture dungeon filled with, manacles and blood-soaked cages and bottles of various acids. And also our protagonist might have a stalker, because he sure does find a lot of pictures of his own house and old clothes he thought he had thrown away. And another thing I hate about this guy, he is so fucking whiny. He has an injured leg, so occasionally he'll say things about how his leg hurts, and that's fine. Or it would be, if not for the rest of his constant whining about everything. When you're leaving the serial killer basement area, there's a broken ladder, and if you try to go down it normally, the ladder breaks and he falls and he hurts his leg even worse than before, and he goes, my leg hurts so bad. But if you keep exploring the serial killer basement, you can find a rope that allows you to go down to the next level more safely. Except if you do that, he'll go, "Oh no, now I have rope burn on my hands." And then he still whines about how it would have made his leg hurt if he had jumped, so what do you want from me, game? And another irritating thing about this game is if you're examining things that are above your head, the character does this little animation where he raises up the flashlight to look at it, and he will not be able to move until the animation finishes and he lowers his flashlight, which sounds fine in theory, except if you happen to just click above the character's head like you were trying to examine something, and you're just out of range to trigger the dialogue he has for it, you'll have to wait for him to finish his flashlight dance until you can scoot him closer to examine the thing that he didn't even have anything interesting to say about in the first place, and you still need to wait several seconds after closing out of the dialogue box for him to lower the flashlight so you can move again, and you're just wasting everybody's time trying to look at it, so really, I guess it was my fault. So you move on to the next area, and it's the sewer level, and your goal is to drain the water enough that you can go down the ladder into the next area. To do so, there are 4 valves in adjacent rooms, and you have to click on them anywhere between 1 and 4 times to get them to stop pumping the water, and that's it. That's the puzzle. So that's the main gameplay loop. You go to the next area, you find a dead body and a murder weapon to go with it, then you go pick up the murder weapon because that's how adventure games work. Then you listen to this dude whine, and you find a bunch of clues that end up not mattering in the end, like the serial killer and/or stalker situation. Who were they, and why were they so fixated on our protagonist and/or Rachel? Never explained. In every area, there's the main path, and there's an optional thing that you can do that unlocks an extra room. For a lot of these, I know where the extra room is, and sometimes I even had the items to unlock it, but I accidentally exited the area and wouldn't be able to go back for it, so I guess I missed out on more story, such as it is. Anyway, the rest of the areas aren't really worth going into detail for. You go from the sewers to the forest to the abandoned factory where the protagonist used to work to the general store where your buddy Norman works and lives, and it seems a whole lot like Norman and Rachel were having an affair, or were they? We'll get to that. Anyway, by this point I had 3 murder weapons in my pockets and had to solve another one of those click on a thing until I say you can stop puzzles. But this time the things were separated by stairs, so I had to watch the stairs animation too, which was certainly a choice. Finally, you get to the series of gates, and it's an extremely frustrating few minutes of gameplay because you, the player, have no idea which gate is the right one. They have no markers to differentiate them, and there are no clues about which one might be yours. The only way to know you have the right house is to click on the right one. So you have no choice but to go up to every gate and click on it and see the protagonist go, "No, this one isn't my house," like you had any way of knowing. I did this about 7 or 8 times before I finally found the right one. Then it's time for the final level, the house. The goal of the level is to find the key to the basement so you can find or not find, but we'll get to that, Rachel's body. So you find the key in the upstairs, and then you have to go all the way back down to the basement where you find a key for a different room in the upstairs that you have to go up to get a crowbar so that you can go back down to the basement and break open the wall. And as I stepped through the broken wall, my breath caught in my throat. This was it. Was Rachel down there? Was she okay? A filthy-looking pile of rags had been dumped in the corner. The stench of them was awful and made my eyes water. I was terrified to even touch the pile, to see what lay within, but I knew I had to. I had come this far. After all this searching, after all I had seen, when I looked within the rags, did I finally find my Rachel? No. The rags were wet, matted, covered in dirt and grime. But inside that tattered mess was no sign of my beloved wife. Rachel wasn't there. I looked around in confusion, trying to figure out what to do next. If she wasn't there, where was she? What had I been searching for this entire time? I remembered the look on Rachel's face when I came home. Didn't I? Then, the awful realization hit me right in the gut. I had been looking at this the wrong way, hadn't I? This is what you've been trying to tell me all along, isn't it? I couldn't find Rachel there, and I won't find her anywhere else because she was never there at all, was she? I stumbled back upstairs, the pain in my leg just a dull ache now. I sat down in my bedroom. So if you say no, the protagonist makes the obvious logical leap to, there is no Rachel, there never was. There's a bit more gameplay after where you explore your house again, and if you say there never was a Rachel, some of the details about the house are a bit different. Like the new TV he had bought turns into an older model because he hadn't bought it actually, and you're allowed to decide whether or not you think you killed Norman or the dude in the first house murdered his wife, and it doesn't matter. None of it does. There's a safe and a puzzle involving a code that I didn't feel like trying to solve, so I googled the solution and found a letter from Rachel inside, which conflicts with the whole there is no Rachel, there never was thing, so I guess there was a Rachel, but she died some time ago and there's no longer a Rachel. The game has 3 endings, but I picked the one where you leave the house rather than one of the 2 where you kill yourself. During the protagonist's ending monologue, he talks directly to the player and accuses them of killing Rachel, which I don't understand, but whatever. Anyway, he's on the run from the law because he did do at least one murder in the version of the story I got. So my problem with this game, aside from it being tedious and boring to play, my specific problem with this game is the there is no Rachel twist. I dislike it for the same reason I disliked Silent Hill Downpour, the open world side quests. No. I think to properly explain my issue with these 2 games' narrative structure, I will need to go on a bit of a journey. So bear with me here. Now this could just be me projecting, but it seems to me there's some very obvious inspiration taken from one Silent Hill 2, a game focusing on James Sunderland, a man searching for his dead wife Mary, who it later turns out that he murdered. And it also has several endings. The in-water ending, where he can't cope with the guilt of what he's done and he drives his car into a lake. The Maria ending, where he and a woman who looks identical to Mary named Maria leave the town together, but Maria is showing symptoms of the illness that Mary had, implying that James is doomed to repeat his mistakes. The Leave ending, where he adopts the little orphan girl that Mary befriended while in the hospital and they leave the town together. There are also some secret endings like the Rebirth ending, where he collects some magic items and attempts to revive Mary with black magic. It's left ambiguous whether or not he was successful. Also the joke endings, Dog and UFO, where James realizes that the town is being controlled by a Shiba Inu named Mira, and an ending where James is abducted by aliens. But those last 2 are less relevant to what I want to talk about here. It's not super clear even to this day what does or does not cause certain endings to trigger. It's not super clear even to this day what does or does not cause certain endings to trigger. It's not super clear even to this day what does or does not cause certain endings to trigger. Will guide you towards the in-water ending where James kills himself. But it's not like there's a, let's call it BioWare-esque moral choice system that slots you into endings. So, as a contrasting example, let's talk about Silent Hill Downpour. This game does feature a BioWare-adjacent moral choice system. You've got good karma and bad karma, and along with certain plot decisions you make determines your ending. Downpour stars Murphy Pendleton, who gets stranded in Silent Hill when the prison bus he's on crashes. See, Murphy is a criminal, but we, the player, don't get to know what he did until the very end of the game. There's a secondary character named Anne, who was the prison guard that was on the bus, and she hates Murphy. And the the reason why involves the crimes that he did. So because of various reasons before the beginning of the game, Murphy makes a deal with an evil prison guard to let him murder one particular prisoner in exchange for Murphy doing him a favor somewhere down the line. The favor turns out to be killing another prison guard who happens to be Anne's father. So she hates Murphy because he murdered her father in cold blood. Or did he? Not if you have high karma, he didn't. Okay, so near the end of the game, Murphy and Anne fight. And you have a choice of two, really three, options. You can either kill her or spare her. If you spare her and have high karma, you get the forgiveness ending, in which it is revealed that Murphy didn't kill Prison Dad, or the guy he specifically got himself sent to prison to kill. It's a long story. And the evil guard he made his murder pact with had to kill the both of them for him, but still framed Murphy for the murders. Anyway, Anne lets Murphy walk off into the sunset and tells the other guards on the radio that he's dead. If you spare her and have low karma, you get the truth and justice ending, where the same reveal about who actually murdered Anne's father happens, but this time, instead of just letting Murphy walk away, she goes back to the prison and kills the evil guard herself. But if you kill Anne but you have high karma, it's revealed that Murphy did actually kill Anne's dad, and now Anne as well. And he gets, super bummed about it and tries to kill himself, but then jump cut, he's back in his prison cell from the beginning of the game. This is the full circle ending, and basically Murphy is trapped in a hell loop until he does better and rewrites the past by not killing Anne, I guess. Fourth ending is similar. You kill Anne with low karma, and Murphy ends up getting executed via lethal injection for murdering his own son as well as Anne's dad. It's the, execution ending. It's, The third option is to let Anne kill you, and then you get an ending where Anne is the one in prison and Murphy is the prison guard. It's called Reversal, and it's... Alright, so you guys are clever people. I'm sure by now you can see what my beef with Downpour is. All of the Western Silent Hill games have been trying to be Silent Hill 2, some more obviously than others. And there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from previous success. Silent Hill 2 was considered to be one of the best survival horror games, not just in the Silent Hill franchise, but ever in history. So taking inspiration from it just makes sense. But I think perhaps Downpour and Home rather miss what it is that made Silent Hill 2 work. In Downpour, Murphy's crimes depend on the actions that you, the player, take in the game. In Home, whether or not you murdered Rachel depends upon a simple yes-no prompt at the end. In Silent Hill 2, Mary is always dead and stuffed in the trunk of James's car because James smothered her in her sleep, and no amount of positive video game choices is going to change that. The endings are about how he deals with what he's done. And for a lot of people, their favorite ending of Silent Hill 2, I mean the serious endings. Obviously, everybody's real favorite ending is the dog ending, but for the serious endings, your favorite, or the ending that you consider to be canon, is usually the one that makes the most sense for how you interpret James as a character. If you're the type to think that James served his time in Silent Hill and learned his lesson, Leave ending makes sense. He escapes from Silent Hill and tries to make good on Mary's last wish, adopting and raising Laura. Alternatively, if you think that James has learned nothing from his time in Silent Hill and is just a fundamentally shitty dude, the Maria ending is right there. But the endings in Downpour, there isn't any interpretation to be done. You either make nice or mean choices when the game tells you it's time to make a nice choice or a mean choice, and then the game rewrites history accordingly. Either you chose the good options, and thus Murphy is a nice man who has never done anything wrong in his life, or you picked the mean options, and Murphy is a cold-blooded murderer. And thus Murphy is a nice man who has never done anything wrong in his life, or you picked the mean options, and Murphy is a cold-blooded murderer. Because in half the endings, Murphy didn't do anything to be forgiven for. And Home, with the Rachel choice, and the other subsequent choices about what you, the player, think happened has the same problem. I think the idea of asking a player to solve the mystery by deciding what the mystery is in the text just isn't a good way to tell a mystery story. Home would have been a much better game if the developer had decided what the story was going to be beforehand and let the player explore it and figure it out for themselves. And the first time through, I didn't know what was going to happen. The "there is no Rachel" thing honestly felt so insulting to me. I guess I could go back and choose to find her corpse, and maybe that would have been a more satisfying narrative, but I don't want to. The game wasn't fun to play the first time. Just thinking about having to complete another one of those tedious click on a background object until I say you can progress the story makes my leg hurt. Overall, it was an unfun experience where a developer threw a bunch of narrative elements at me and told me, now you do something with it. Nah, that's not how this works. I paid you real money to tell me a story. I didn't pay $3, which isn't a lot, but it's still way too much for what I got. 3 of my real human dollars to make up my own story. I can do that for free. Thank you so much for watching whatever this was. If you liked the video, there's a button dedicated to telling me so. Feel free to hit it, and while you're down there, why not hit that subscribe button as well? The bell too. That way you can see when I post more of these videos. As I mentioned at the top, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Intergy, where you can see these videos before anyone else, as well as Patreon-only bonus videos. Speaking of my patrons, thank you so much to my patrons for all of your support. Okay, bye.